We'd like to welcome everyone to today's session, Planning for Your Financial Future. Welcome everyone. My name is Matthew Elder. I'm an Education and Training Officer, and I'm here today to welcome Lali Wiratunga to present today. So this is a session that's been put on especially for this week, for National Carers Week, and I want to thank you all for attending this session. So once again, welcome to today's session, Planning for Your Financial Future. In this session, Lali Wiratunga will help carers learn how to develop a plan that reflects relevant goals for your stage of life, whether you're starting out working or planning for retirement, help you to sustain the momentum by implementing positive financial habits and identify appropriate sources of help. So Lali is the National Manager of Westpac's Financial Education Specialist, the Davidson Institute, and he will be here to assist you through the workshop. Before we go, I will say that in 2016, Lali was recognised for creating a positive impact through Pro Bono Australia's Impact 25 list. And following a career as a corporate lawyer and management consultant in the UK, he's had over 15 years experience in roles across financial services in Australia. He has served in the community as a board member of a disability service organisation, is a member of the Alumni Advisory Board at the University of New South Wales Business School, and it is here where he mentors students and advocates for the value of business education. So with that, I'd like to pass over to Lali. Lali, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you to Carers New South Wales for letting the Davidson Institute and myself share a little bit of time with you to help you on your financial journey, to build your financial confidence. As well as the introduction that Matt gave, at the moment, I'm also a temporary carer for my mother. She's going through cataract surgery. So I'm getting a little bit of an introduction into the world that you would go through as carers, but as I say, only an introduction. And I know that, as carers, you're in the business of helping others. And it's so, so important when you're in that business of helping others, you also take that time to help yourself, to build your own well-being up. And including in that well-being, we also think about financial well-being. Before I go any further, just want to let you know that what I'm going to cover off during today's session is general in nature. It's by no means does it constitute advice. There are professionals that you can go to for specific advice. So with that, I'll continue and let's get through the agenda and get on with today. So what we're going to cover off through the agenda is we're going to follow a typical financial life cycle. And that starts off with, getting started, then establishing foundations, helping people grow their wealth, and then using that wealth. Now let's look at that financial life cycle, which has got a number of ups and downs as kind of indicated by what you see on the screen. And I'm not sure what age group you are, what stage of life you're in, but as I say, we'll start off with a typical financial life cycle. And in those early years, people are starting out and they're on their financial journey, they're increasing their income, increasing their assets perhaps. They might have their first job, buying a car. And what's really, really important at that stage is to build good money habits. And then as working life continues, you start establishing long-term relationships, you take on longer-term commitments. Your wealth tends to fluctuate depending on, career and life events, as you know well as carers. And that can also impact your cash flow. And so while you're getting on and establishing, starting to create some long-term wealth, you need to have a focus on saving to ensure your commitments can be met. The next stage of that financial journey is where you're building and optimizing your wealth as you prepare for a life potentially after work, and more specifically, the time when you might stop earning an income from employment. And during this time, there are lots of different events, of course, that can take place. There's children, there's caring, as you know well, there's perhaps buying properties, and there's other changes to your family situation. But of course, throughout that time, for your own personal situation, it's about maximizing your wealth. And this is what's going to sustain people during their retirement, you during your retirement. Then, of course, comes that day when you finish your work and life can change dramatically and significantly. And at this point, you might want to use some of that wealth you've built up and actually use it to do other things. There might be some more community work you want to take on, or simply spend time with loved ones and family members. That's just, as I say, a typical life cycle. It by no stretch, is indicative of your situation. Everyone's situation is different. But to help, go through today, we want to try and talk about this typical life cycle, and then tease out some of the financial confidence elements through that. So let's start with getting started. And this is where you're starting to experience the freedom of your own money. And up until this point, someone might generally have had someone take care of their money, but this is when they start taking responsibility for their own money. And as I say, it could be because they're starting a job for the first time. Now, many of you may well be past this stage of your life, but it's worthwhile kind of just reflecting on it and see if there's some things we can learn at this stage. So as you move through this kind of stage of the life cycle, there's things you're going to want to change. It's going to be different depending on the person. There are going to be different goals you have at that stage of life. And a financial plan is about having your finances sorted so you're able to achieve your goals. Now, let's start with something really fundamental and basic to getting good financial habits, and it's creating a money diary. So a money diary, there's different ways you can do this. This could be in writing, or this could be on an app, but it's where you record dollars and cents that you spend, say, on a typical day, and then building up over a number of typical days into a typical month. And that's where, you record your daily coffee, your rent, other things, for example, streaming subscription services that you have. It's there to give you a very clear picture of where you're spending your money. And then from that, you can start categorizing your spend. So you've got an indication of where you're spending your money. Now let's categorize it. And again, the pie chart displayed here is potentially typical of a young adult, might not necessarily represent your pie chart. But the key thing here is to think about what your goals are and can you achieve them. And if you find that on your pie chart, you're spending a certain, a larger percentage of your money on certain things. It might be, transport, or it could be entertainment even. You might then want to adjust and reflect and, what can change in your budget. So let's look a bit further into budgeting. The first things you need to think about with that pie chart is, dividing it up. Dividing up into commitments. Those commitments could be long-term loan repayments, phone plans, the like, where you have a contract in effect, where you're committed to repay or pay for something. Then you need to look at the kind of spending that you need to live. And that could be your housing, your transport, food, clothing, and health. Then there might be these other discretionary expenses to support your lifestyle. That could be the sport you do, the entertainment, even clothes that you might need above the normal type of clothes, the kind of entertainment clothes you might wear out. And this is where after that, you might get a sense of the money you have left over. And that money you'd have left over, what that represents is money that can help you achieve your dreams and goals. If this amount isn't enough, or it's going to take too long to save up, then you might need to think about how you can adjust some of your spending in order to achieve those goals. And by prioritizing what's most important, you'll then be able to construct a manageable budget for yourself to help you get the most out of life. Now, as I said at the beginning, I represent Westpac's Davidson Institute, and we're all about helping people build their financial confidence. We've gone through a pie chart. It might not represent your pie chart. And if there are goals you want to achieve, in order to help you achieve those goals, you might need to look at where you can cut costs or reduce some of your expenses. And on the Davidson Institute website, we have a number of resources to help you. One of them is a cost-cutting checklist. And maybe afterwards, I can introduce you to that. So let's get on to the next stage. And this is where you're establishing foundations. You've developed some good money habits, and the next stage of your financial journey is about consolidating and establishing good foundations. And you want to do that in order to help you achieve those personal goals we reflected on earlier. It could involve traveling later in life. It could involve, seeing other parts of Australia. Those personal goals are exactly that. They're personal to you. They're going to depend on your needs and wants. Then let's go back to that financial life cycle and let's look at the establishing foundations and creating wealth stage. And during this stage, your needs might be a little bit more larger, a bit more expensive. Could be that there's a new car or a house, or the needs that come with having children. And so this is the stage where instead of saving, you might need to spend or even borrow to be able to afford to buy the things that you want for this stage of life. So let's look at this question: should I save or should I borrow? Saving or borrowing are two different ways of achieving the same goal, getting the things you want. And the key to determining whether to use your savings or getting a loan, borrowing, lies in understanding when the thing you want is needed and the difference in cost. Now, it may take some time to save enough money for bigger ticket items, but you may need to have them sooner. If you decide to borrow to make your purchase now, it will cost you more and potentially take you longer to pay it off. Now, to bring this to life, let's look at the example of buying a car. If you want to save up to purchase a car that costs $25,000, you could save $431 per month, and it would take you a little over 4 years to save up that $25,000. But in 4 years' time, your the question to ask is your $25,000 going to purchase the same type of car that it would do now? Prices are probably likely to have increased, so it's likely that your $25,000 will buy you a car, but maybe not the same quality of car, the same standard of car that you wanted before. The good news is that it'll only have cost you roughly $23,800 of your own money. The other $1,200 could come from interest that's accrued, depending on the interest rate that applies. On the other hand, if you were to borrow to purchase that car now on an unsecured loan, it would take you roughly 7 years to pay off the loan at the same rate as you're saving. That's about $431 a month, including interest and fees. And this would actually use more than $36,000 of your own money. And once you've paid more than $36,000, you have a 7-year-old car and potentially have to pay a higher price again to replace it. Now, again, this is a kind of subject that you can learn so much more about. We've covered this off at a very high level. There's more information on the Davidson Institute about borrowing in a session, a webinar that we have on the theme of borrowing. So let's just move on to the next subject. And this is all about protecting and protection of assets. So let's just bring up the elements of that pie chart. Oops. So you may have some serious money commitments and some assets. And there might be some long-term commitments you have in place. And this is the time when you need to think about protecting your assets and your lifestyle. Insuring your assets, it's all about effectively placing the risk of loss or damage of those assets into someone else's hands, and that's the insurer. Taking the time to do the research to get a policy that's going to best suit you is really, really important. The next thing to think about is protecting your income. After all, if you're not able to work for a period of time, you may need some level of income coming in. And that could come from income replacement or salary continuance. And this pays a percentage of your fortnightly or monthly income. The next thing, of course, is protecting your health. We all know that's one of our most important intangible assets. And so you can continue to earn income. This is really important here. This is actually, it's important to think about a healthy lifestyle as well as insurance. And in some regards, a healthy lifestyle will help you in the longer run. But governments, health insurance schemes, Medicare, and then thinking about your health-related expenses and thinking what might need to be covered by private health insurance is also really important. And finally, that last part might be thinking about protecting your family's future. If for some reason the main income earner is not in a position to earn income because they're in a situation of permanent disability, perhaps, the questions that might need to be asked, one of those questions might be, how will the family pay off any borrowings and continue to fund the lifestyle they want to have. And this is where life insurance can come in. Now, the next stage to think about is building a strong foundation for yourself. And this is about growing wealth. Again, this is a whistle-stop tour of a really important subject, but let's just go back to that financial life cycle. And throughout this maximizing wealth phase of your life, there are many things that are going to impact on your ability to do just that, maximize income. Because of course, life goes on. There are children put through school perhaps, and university. There may be, of course, changes to family situation. And people might want to have certain investments for their future. There's only a finite amount of time to prepare yourself for this life after work. So there's one of the key tools to help you build wealth is investing. That is earning more money, whether it's in the form of capital growth or cash flow from the things you own. And when it comes to investing, there's nothing truer than the adage on the screen right now. It's time in the market, not timing the market that counts. And in investing, as in life, time is our most valuable asset. One of the best decisions you can make is to start sooner rather than later. It doesn't matter what you invest in. It could be property, shares, or simply cash in a cash account. Time allows for three very important things to happen. First of all, time allows for compounding. Compounding refers to adding the earnings from your investments back into the investment. For example, earning additional interest on the interest reinvested in a deposit. Time also allows for us to make additions. Regular additions over time will build up the capital value of the investment, which will increase earnings on the investment too. And time gives us time to ride out volatility. Volatility is one of the risks of investing. On any given day, investment returns can fluctuate. They can go up, then go down, and sometimes they can be negative. By spending time in the market, you give yourself the time to, you give yourself the opportunity to ride out volatility. Okay, so let's just bring up the elements here. So one way to manage volatility is to have a diverse investment portfolio. There are a number of different types of assets that you can invest in, and they all have different levels of risk and return, as is shown on the screen right now. By spreading your investment dollars across each asset type, we can reduce our exposure to any volatility within any one asset class. So now let's just walk through some typical common asset classes, the four that I've got on the screen. The first investment type is cash. Now, cash investments are things like money in your savings account. Cash is a flexible investment, and it's considered a low risk investment, but generally doesn't provide as high a return as some of the other investment types that we're going to look at. The next type of investment is fixed interest. Fixed interest through a deposit potentially is a term deposit, is where you lock away your cash for a fixed period of time. In return for locking away your cash, your money, you get in return a fixed interest for that, for the return. And it generally pays a higher amount, a higher return than cash. The third investment type is property, and it can be considered a medium to a higher risk depending on where the property is located. And this partly because it takes longer to sell property and get your cash back compared to other investments. But also there's volatility in property prices and the rental yield, what you get from renting out a property. There is no guarantee of that. For the increased risk associated with property, property in Australia at least generally gives a better return than cash or fixed interest. Now, of course, you know, the figures on the screen, as you can see, are gross returns for the 20 years to December 2017. You know, these numbers will change over time. This is just indicative only. The fourth type of investment is shares. On the screen, it shows Australian shares, but there are other shares from other countries and other types of products within shares that you could look at. But shares have a medium to higher risk level of risk. The share market is subject to a greater deal of volatility, and that's kind of indicated in the return. It's important, as per the earlier caution, to remember it's time in the market, not timing the market that counts. And that is very much true of shares, not just Australian shares, but any shares. So let's now look at a very, very important part of your wealth plans. That's your super. And, let's just unpack why super. It's one of the most important investments we'll have. And it's a great place for long-term investing, as there are attractive tax advantages. To encourage people to invest in super and save for their retirement, legislation allows us to salary sacrifice our contributions up to a specific amount. This means that not only are you reducing your tax-paying income, but your concessional contributions are taxed at 15% instead of your marginal tax rate. It's important to remember that with super, it's aimed at saving for retirement. So typically, you can't access your money until you retire. And that has been recently, because of COVID, some changes there, but typically you can't access it until you retire. If the goal you want to achieve is to have enough money to retire in, the way you would like to live, then directing investment money into your superannuation is very important to consider. If the goal you want to achieve is perhaps to retire before your retirement age, then investing outside of your super may be something to consider. Most people may use a combination of the two, or just depending on the weighting, they'll use a combination of the two. Super is a really important investment for many of us, as it may well be what will help us to live comfortably in retirement. So again, that was a topic that can be covered off in far more detail, and there's more information available on the Davidson Institute to help you. So let's look at the next phase, and this is about using wealth. You've developed good money habits, built solid foundations, and you're now ready to think about the next phase of life. Let's go back to our financial life cycle. And for some, retirement may happen in the 50s, 60s, but for others, it could be much later, depending on things like their health, their finances, their work availability, their other responsibilities, and whether they actually enjoy working or not. Whatever age a person decides to stop working and to retire, this is the point when they need to start using the wealth that they've accumulated to provide them with an income. Now, the next is a series of photos, images that for some might indicate the typical retirement dream. Again, that retirement dream is going to look very different for different people. It could be where they spend time traveling, spending time with family, volunteering potentially. It could be a number of things. But what's important to consider is they're going to be left with a choice. People are going to be left with a choice, such as, do I retire outright? Or if I am still able to work and enjoy doing so, do I continue or perhaps reduce my hours? They might ask, do I extract a lump sum from my retirement saving, or do I draw a regular pension? They also might then ask, how does the current economic environment, the economic situation that we're living in, impact the savings and how that person can access them? There's a number of questions that get asked. Another one of those might even be, what are the tax implications? What's really, really important is to make sure that you get the right advice that's specific to your specific situation, because we can't generalize about these things. It is a whistle-stop tour, planning for life. It gives you a sense of, the things you might need to know to get started. Then we went through and looked at building solid foundations, and then looking at, things like what might I need to do to live, what might I need to do to either borrow or save for my goals, and how should I go about protecting the assets and the things that are important to me. Then we started to talk about wealth and investing your money. And then, finally, we briefly looked at retirement and planning out how you can spend your wealth that you created through your working life. A financial plan, it's there for life. There's elements of this that at stages 1, 2, 3, and 4 that you could incorporate into your planning right now. As I said earlier, I encourage you to try and get specific advice to absorb and as much information that you can. That's available from resources like the Davidson Institute. And very quickly, because I appreciate in half an hour together, there's only so much we can cover. I wanted to just step you through some of the things that we have available in the Davidson Institute. So it's a resource, an educational resource available from davidsoninstitute.education. And we cover off things like a financial fitness course, which includes bite-sized modules and articles and videos, and even now podcasts, actually, that you can consume on demand as you like. Appreciate, as someone working in financial services 15 years, that there's a number of words, terms we use, jargon, that needs to be explained simply. So what we did was we created some, bite-sized videos to explain complex financial terms simply, like what is compound interest. And again, you can access that content on demand freely from the Davidson Institute. And then appreciating that, we have different forms of learning. Some people like to watch, some people like to listen, some people like to read. We have a number of downloadable tools. So the one on the screen there, Managing Your Money, is just one of those tools. So that's a whistle-stop tour of planning for your financial future.
On behalf of Mary and I, we want to thank you, thanks Lali, for a great presentation, very insightful for all of us concerned here today. And we want to wish everyone that it's attended, a happy National Carers Week 2021.